Hello, my name is Jill Fagerio and I'm an Associate Professor in the Centre for Lifelong Learning at the University of Warwick in the UK. I'm a former career development practitioner in higher education, and now I teach on our postgraduate programmes in career development work. In this presentation, I'm going to go through a few thoughts about inclusive career development practices in the UK and suggest 3 ways that our practices can be sure to support the well-being of students, including all those who are from backgrounds who might have found our services inaccessible or unsuitable for their needs. I'm talking here about students from different ethnic backgrounds, older students, students with disabilities, students whose identities differ from what we might see as normative, as in white, male, cisgendered, able-bodied and heterosexual. Social class is an important dimension here. In the UK, we've had a particular focus in recent times on students from socio-economic backgrounds who have not traditionally participated in higher education. First of all, there's a number of ways to establish these particular needs. I'd suggest beginning by looking at your data. Are you able to tell if students from particular demographics are participating equally in your activities? If you can't tell it from your data, do you get a sense of it from what you see around you? Do you have any destination data that could be interrogated to see if particular groups of students are more likely or less likely to progress to job opportunities that are congruent with their interests, their choices, or categorised as positive in some other way? You can then compare this with regionally or nationally available data about disadvantages that particular groups may experience in the job market. Earning levels, participation levels, and reported perceptions of disadvantage may all be available to you as secondary data. Building that case is a useful starting point. I'm going to outline 3 particular approaches that we can take to inclusion and say a little bit about the pros and cons of each of these and some of the things that we might need to think about if we're going to follow them. The first approach is to develop bespoke, tailored, targeted and ring-fenced provision that's only available to some students. That might mean providing a particular career development learning opportunity that's only open to students with disabilities or students from a particular ethnic background or students who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual or transgender, which we abbreviate to LGBT, for example. The great thing about schemes like this is that it demonstrates really clearly that you're recognising that these students may have particular needs and also your own commitment to meeting those needs. So, for example, an opportunity for students with disabilities can focus on issues like disclosure and negotiating what in UK legislation we call reasonable adjustments. That's the provision that employers have to make under equality law. The scheme could broker with employers for these students to get access to particular opportunities with them for work experience or mentoring. And that's a really positive action that can be taken to remove what is sometimes a significant barrier. Advertising schemes like this also demonstrates to students who aren't in that particular group that these barriers exist, raising their awareness that they are learning and working alongside others who have different needs from them. However, it must be said that sometimes the students that won't benefit from these ring-fenced opportunities can voice resentment about this, and that needs careful handling and your business case making clear. The other risks of this form of provision is that by highlighting the particular disadvantages that your targeted group experience, you're negating any advantages that they may also have. You're overemphasising the negative, taking attention away from the positive dimensions of their identity, their resilience and tenacity in overcoming barriers, their ability to leverage difference when they have no choice but to stand out in the crowd. Another factor to bear in mind with a scheme like this is whether there be any cost to the student in signing up to participate. For example, if they're LGBT, are they comfortable being out to everyone around them? If they have an invisible disability, They'd be disclosing this by participating in a scheme for students with disabilities. Finally, if you're going to target provision in this way by mailing the information to students who've confirmed that it's relevant to them, your data needs to be watertight. If you have high levels of non-response to voluntary enrolment questions about their ethnicity, their gender identity, or sexual orientation, you probably need to also advertise to all, in which case, are you going to build in any eligibility check and how? In an ideal world, you'll be able to trust a student self-identifying as a potential beneficiary, but you'll know how this might play out in your context. The second type of scheme I want to suggest we think about is developed in partnership with particular student groups in your university. Students from specific groups may have self-organised into social or campaigning networks. If members of these groups aren't participating equally in your activities, then it can be a good idea to develop a relationship with the students who are organising these groups to open up a conversation about how they feel about the career development services that are available. These conversations can lead to identifying particular barriers to their participation. It might be that working in partnership with them, you can generate enough trust to offer something collaboratively, sharing the ownership and sharing organisation. And that can really help you to understand the perspective of the demographic in question. Now, I've seen this done really effectively and really well. But one thing I've noticed is that it does require that we as practitioners cultivate a particular stance before and during our engagement with student groups, especially if we're very experienced at running career development services for students, and we know a lot about career development work and what's effective in our context. It can be quite challenging to engage in equal conversations with people who don't know as much and see things quite differently. We have to be open to rethinking the way that we do things based on what those students tell us. There are some case studies of this sort of co-creation currently being gathered in the UK for a future edition of Phoenix magazine, published by our professional body, AGCAS. The final mode of inclusion that I want to highlight is one where we don't differentiate any of our provision. We simply offer what we offer. But we scrutinise our provision and how it's promoted and how it's described and its content for any inbuilt assumptions about who our clients are. We make sure that the images that we use are reflecting the diversity of our student body, even if we have to go out and find new ones that include students with disabilities or from particular ethnic backgrounds, students who aren't conforming to traditional gender presentation. If we're going to go this way, we probably need an intentional process of auditing our provision, including getting feedback from particular student groups. The advantage to this particular approach is that rather than treating inclusion as a thing that you do, as another strand to your programme, it becomes something that you are. If you're able to really identify and implement changes to all of your practice that creates an inclusive underpinning to your service, offering this approach can be transformative. However, it requires a great deal of trust and openness in a staff team to reflect on such unconscious bias. So those are my 3 ideas of ways to develop inclusive practice in career services in higher education. I'd love to know what you think about them, how they match your own experiences, and what, if anything, you might want to add to the ideas that I've presented here. Thanks very much for watching.